Hello, faithful listener, and welcome back to episode 11 of the Select Characters podcast, where we are here to talk about video games. Hopefully have a little fun while we're doing it. Here in this secret volcano lair at the center of the earth, I've got some friends with me. I've got the executive magma flow controller, Chris Anderson. What's up?
It's hot in here.
So hot! I know. Maybe the volcano lair. Not the best idea.
Yeah, everything's good, man.
Good. Glad to hear it. And chief in charge of Tectonic Shift, I've got Ryan Dildine. What's up, man?
Hey, not much. How's it going?
It's going well. And let's see, we've got the chief technology officer in charge of levers and buttons, Mr. Enrique Cancel.
Everything's all pushy and levery.
Good. Levers are up where they should be up.
Levers are up, buttons are down.
All right, levers are up. Invest in lever futures. We've got a great show lined up for you today. And just a couple of notes before we get started. We've got some video content starting to go up on YouTube. We've got a really nice afterthoughts that Chris made on The Witcher 3, talking about just some general impressions and ideas after his playthrough, and I think you'll really like that.
Because that dead horse hasn't been beaten enough by now by us.
Well, I mean, we really liked it, so of course we'd keep making content on it, right?
That's definitely true.
It's still a phenomenal game. So stay tuned for that. We've got a new segment we want to get going, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that after the topics. So that said, you guys ready to roll into what we've been playing?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
All right, so it's been a pretty good week for video games. It's been hot where I'm at, so I've been inside playing video games. How about you guys?
Yeah, that is definitely the logical response to hot weather. Just stay indoors.
That's what I think. Anybody playing anything cool this week?
World of Warcraft. I'm at level 100 now, which I find a bit weird because the leveling experience is really, really quick.
Is that the cap?
Yeah, that is the cap. And now I have to start grinding dungeons for gear, and then there's heroic dungeons, and I think that there's mythic dungeons above that. And yeah, but I don't know. I really like questing in World of Warcraft, but it was so quick in this expansion. Like, just 3 or 4 days of like 6 to 7 hour sessions, something like that.
Did you start from scratch? Or
how far did you go from, 90 or?
I went from 90 to 100. But I can remember when Wrath of the Lich King came out, it took me and my brother like 2 or 3 weeks to do all the questing content. And now I'm just sort of done. Strange.
I know they did like a big experience, compression where, it's supposed to be a lot faster level. I think part of it is just trying to get into like the newer crowds to join the game. It won't be as daunting.
Yeah, I can see that. But for me as a veteran player, I'd rather have like a ton of stories because I like that.
Yeah, what was your gut feeling? Was it less quests but more EXP?
I think it was less quests. And
That's
those all awarded a fuck ton more XP. But that being said, Draenor is pretty cool. I'm in Nagrand, I think it's pronounced. Nagrand or Nagrand, something like that. I'm in there now, and I love it. It's lush, it's beautiful, it's very large and open. And yeah, it's great. That was my favorite zone in the Burning Crusade, and it's shaping up to be my favorite zone in Warlords of Draenor as well. It's really good.
One thing that I liked about Warlords of Draenor is how they're doing the questing. During Wrath of the Lich King, they had I guess it was almost like a hidden quest chain, where it culminated in this nice little cinematic called the Wrathgate.
Yeah.
Which it was a really cool little cinematic that showed Alliance and Horde, like they're kind of meeting in the middle, fighting together, and then they're storming the gate of Icecrown Citadel.
Yeah, there's more of that. There's more of that in there now. There's not a lot of cinematics, but you get quite a few, like 4 or 5 over the course of you leveling up.
That was in the zone with the huge tower, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting though, because like in Wrath of the Lich King, it wasn't really obvious how to get to it. A lot of people didn't start finding out about it until like after the fact, because you needed to complete so many different quest chains in order for it to all completely unlock. So, and then they kind of took it out after a while. So a lot of people were upset about it, but they did receive a lot of really good feedback. So with Warlords of Draenor, I got the feeling that they just made it almost like a standard that when you reach the last quest of a zone, you get this nice little cinematic to show that you wrapped up with the story there. Then you go to the next area.
Yeah. And, the in-game cinematics, or like the cinematics that they make with the engine but are pre-rendered, I think they are really good. Very fun to watch.
Cool, man. So what, another month and a half left on that subscription?
Yeah, something like that. I'm going to try do some dungeons, maybe, do some heroic stuff. I'm doing more of the garrison stuff, which I'm starting to believe is just a very, very clever way of keeping you coming back to the game because you've got all these missions that you sent your followers on, and you sort of want to know if you got more stuff or if they succeeded in the mission. So you log on, every 5 or 6 hours to send them on new missions and reap the rewards, so to speak. So, but I don't really know if it adds a lot. Like, I won't be sad if the garrison won't be in the next expansion, but it works for this one. It's all right.
Cool. Well, that sounds pretty fun.
Mm-hmm. So what else? I mucked about a bit with what was it called? Like Space Engine, or what was it?
Space Engineers?
No. Universe Sandbox 2, that one.
Oh.
That one's in early access, and I really like the first one. So I'm starting to muck about with the second one now. And it's pretty cool. It looks better. There's a really good music in there, and it's just a great way to do space stuff.
Yeah, I remember that was really cool. My favorite part about the first one was you could send like a pulse of light out from any planet that you wanted.
Yeah.
And then watch as it propagated throughout the universe and get that real sense of the speed of light, and then be like bummed out like that it's so slow compared to how huge the universe is.
Yeah.
I hope the second one has a lot of those little self-contained experiments too, because those were some of my favorite things.
Yeah, they do. You've got a lot of stuff that like project files that you can open up with different scenarios and stuff, and there's quite a lot of interesting stuff there. It's got quite a lot of features for something that's still in early access, but I think they're quite far along in the program right now. Like, I'm not entirely sure on that, but I think they're quite far along because it feels complete.
It's awesome.
That was it.
I look forward to that one. All right, let's move on over here to Enrique. How you doing?
Good, man. I've actually been playing Ronin, which I've been having a lot more fun with it now. It's you guys ever play Gunpoint?
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
Gunpoint is the best punching in video games. Said it before.
Yes.
Say it again.
Ronin is actually very similar to it. It's actually got a really similar art style, and it's got an interesting kind of turn-based real-time combat mode where when you get to run into enemies, it kind of pauses the screen and you can dictate. You can use a cursor to target a jump, and then from the jump you can actually do an attack. And between your moves, the enemies will actually move in real time. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I saw some gameplay. It looked good. It looked pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's fun. It's got like the whole little assassination story where you have to. It's really simple in scope. Levels usually break down into you have to hack certain terminals, so it's part puzzle where you have to figure out how to get to it. Sometimes you have to do it without alerting security. Other times you basically have to kill everybody all on the way. They have civilians in the game, so if they see you, they'll actually trip the alarm and go into lockdown mode. But at the same time, you get penalized for killing them, so it kind of gives you a little bit of management area. The only thing that I'm kind of not liking is the controls are really sporadic. So I was saying you actually use the mouse cursor to kind of aim where your jump's going to be. And it's really cool because you can actually measure the arc and everything like that, and sometimes it'll actually tell you if the jump you're going to make is going to take 1 or 2 turns, which is really useful in combat.
It's kind of similar to Gunpoint too.
Yeah, but it sucks when you're playing and you're trying to do a jump and the cursor isn't really aligning to where you need to go. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of trial and error, shaking the mouse back and forth and trying to make sure you're targeting the specific area, and that can get kind of frustrating.
It's still early, right? I'm sure they'll tune that up.
Yeah, but overall, it's actually really cool. And if you think Gunpoint's a really good punching simulator, this is actually a really good sword simulator.
Sweet, man. I like the queue up actions sort of thing. Really makes you feel like a badass samurai. Seems cool. Yeah,
especially as you level up, you can actually unlock different attributes and skills. And one of the ones that I have right now, which is actually a pretty badass combo, is I can throw my sword at nearby enemies, and I can also set a hail of ninja stars to kind of incapacitate people. So when you're playing, it'll queue up the moves, and I think as you get those multipliers for the combos, you can do more and more abilities at the same time. So it's pretty neat when you can jump from one wall and suddenly teleport behind an enemy, shoot out ninja stars, throw your sword at the guy on the other side of the room, and take out 6 people at once.
Hey, that sounds fun, man. Anything else?
No, that's pretty much it. I've been kind of stuck in a room with no AC around the house, so I'm only playing what my laptop can play, and that's actually a pretty low requirement for my system. So,
well, I mean, I can tell you, I just a few weeks ago found a lot of gaming enjoyment playing under those exact same constraints. So if you need any recommendations, you hit me up. All right, cool, man. So how about you, Ryan?
All right, so I set aside Spec Ops: The Line, and I started playing Heroes of the Storm based on a friend's recommendation, and I didn't know anything about it going into it. He just pretty much said, hey, download this, and so I did, and I started playing, and I wasn't looking to get into another MOBA.
Because you were a big League of Legends guy before, right?
Yeah, it wasn't real high on my priority list because I was like, I don't want to get into another game where I have to study it to play it, And I actually like Heroes of the Storm quite a bit so far. It seems like it's kind of a simplified version of League in that it seems like, I don't want to say there's no metagame to it, but a lot of the metagame has been stripped away in that, there's not a bunch of items that you have to research about and all that kind of stuff. It's just, you get in. I feel like it's like what Dominion should have been in League of Legends.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And yeah, I liked it. It was, to me, it felt pretty fast paced. I'm still getting used to the game flow, which I'm still not really sure what I'm doing. And there's some things in it that kind of, I don't know if I'm sure if I like about it or not. Like, I feel like some of the gameplay is kind of stiff and clunky. And this may be due to my inexperience, but I feel like some characters are really strong and some aren't. Like, stuff happens and it doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know, maybe it's probably just me being new to the game, but
the fact that it's Blizzard, I would probably tend to trust them, even though, it felt weird to me. As like, I'd be willing to give them a little more credit than anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, I figured when we were playing, we were all getting frustrated because this one, I don't even know who it was just wrecking us. And we were all frustrated, like, oh, that's so overpowered, and blah, 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 complaining. But it's probably not,
Was it Illidan by chance?
No, I think it was Jaina.
Oh, right.
With the stupid ice thing that comes down, and I think it slows everybody or something.
Yeah.
But we were getting destroyed by that, and it was so frustrating. So we have to figure something out.
There's like two characters that I hate playing against, and it's Illidan, provided that the Illidan actually knows what he's doing, and Nova. Nova is just ridiculous. Like, especially when she levels up, like around level 19, 20, something like that. Mm-hmm. She becomes like a one-man army or one-woman army. It's ridiculous. Hate it.
Yeah. Who's the guy who goes invisible?
Zeratul.
I hate him.
Is that a medication or a person?
It's like the StarCraft 2 character Zeratul. He's an assassin in the game, and he can turn invisible, just like Nova. Fucking hate that.
Well, keep us posted.
Well, other than that, I hopped back onto DayZ to check out the new patch, and it's getting there. I find that game, because 5.55 was such a terrible patch, but me and a couple buddies have started playing DayZ again on a regular basis, so it's getting there.
It's a standalone or the mod?
Standalone.
Right. Like, I don't often hear stuff about it, but every time I hear something, it's not usually positive.
The negative crowd is very loud about DayZ.
Are they, like, is the negativity in any way justified? Or is it all hyperbole?
I feel it's mostly hyperbole. I feel like, this is obviously my opinion, but I think a lot of people got into it not expecting the development process to take so long.
Right.
And they just didn't do research and are kind of mad they got burned on $30. But I don't know. Like I said, the game does have its flaws, and it's taken a really long time to get made, but I don't know. I feel like it's getting there, and I think it will be a good game when it's finished.
When it's finished.
Yeah.
Well, as long as they keep chugging along, I guess that's enough that you can have a
when
little
you compare it to other games, the timetable it's not long. It's like on par with, other games of that scale. So, the whole mindset I've taken with it is, it's not over till the fat lady sings. And if it's a good game when they release the final product, then it's a good game. If it's not, it's not. And then we can all bash on it. But I think it's too early to jump ship,
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? You don't get 2 releases on Steam. You get 1 release, just 1. And they decided to release it when it was still pretty much a technical alpha, slightly better implemented than the mod was. Mm-hmm. So that is their release. And they released their game so early in development.
Yeah. I would totally agree with that, except for how many warnings they have put up about don't buy the game, unless you expect all this stuff. And like, if they didn't say any of that and they were just like, hey, here's an alpha game, go ahead and buy it, I'd be like, yeah, these guys, it's kind of shady. But there's so many warnings around DayZ, like on the Steam page, when you first log into the game, all this stuff that say, look, it's a really, it's an alpha game, it's really rough, blah, blah, blah. If they didn't have that, I'd be on that page, but...
Yeah, but still, they released it in early alpha, and they asked people $30 to play the technical alpha, and because it's so early in development still, it will take them quite a long time still to finish it.
To be honest, though, I think that $30 price point was kind of meant to be a deterrent as well, just so people feel like they're, if you're going to spend the $30, it's because you're actively interested and not because you're going to buy it on a whim.
Right.
And I think... Well, the frustrating thing for me is to see somebody who has 1,000 hours in the game complaining about how it's so bad. And it's like, dude, you got 1,000 hours for $30. Like, obviously you got your money's worth.
Oh, I love that when I see that in the Steam review section. It's like 600 hours on record. This game fucking sucks.
It's like if you have 15 hours and it's like, yeah, okay, whatever, you didn't like it, but...
Well, DayZ and survival games are really interesting because they're not like your traditional games where you have levels and progressions and you have like set benchmarks of how, far along the process of the game is.
Right.
So for a lot of these people, I mean, a lot of the work behind the scenes are just like really simple, like fixing bugs, making sure there's better stability in the servers, adding like really, really small functions that the average gamer isn't going to notice. So I think part of the frustration people have is because they don't get to actively see these benchmarks of, how the game's progressing.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, when the game's finished, and if it sucks when it's finished, I will totally go back on my word, and be like, yeah, it's a shitty game, but I think it'll be a pretty good game when it's all said and done.
Cool, man. Anything else you played?
Nope. I lost a couple rounds of Counter-Strike, got mad, stopped. Like usual, so...
Yeah, it happens. As for myself, I've been dipped into Team Fortress 2 again since they had that new gunmetal update.
Oh yeah, what is that update? I've been seeing stuff for that, but I'm not entirely clear as to what that is.
Yeah, I'm not 100% either, but I'll tell you how I engaged with it. So the way it works is you get a certain number of contracts, and I believe you get 2 a week maybe, and they're just small objectives within the game, like, as play as an engineer and get so many kills with a sentry gun, or score so many points.
Right.
Play as a medic and get so many assists with an Ubered Heavy, stuff like that. And like little sort of goals and mini achievements. Mm-hmm. You complete the contract, and then it gives you like a unique item, or possibly even one of their cases or whatever.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like a sort of small objectives and stuff, which I thought was awesome, but the contracts seem to be coming really slowly, which is not quite enough for me, because the rewards or whatever, I'm only playing TF2 just during this to see what this is like. So having a super awesome weapon, I'm selling them all off until I recoup my $6 investment, right? Like, I'm just there to see what's going on with TF2, because I haven't really touched that game in a few years.
Right, so the update costs money?
It costs $6, yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, it's not too shabby.
No, I don't think so. And I guess for a lot of people, it's a free-to-play game, right? So
yeah, definitely.
What's $6? Not a big deal. But it's interesting. It's fun. That game is absolutely nuts. I mean, as much as you can assume it would be, like, after so much time has passed and they keep adding more and more items and things. It's crazy, but still fun. Still the same kind of core, fun team kind of game that it always was, just now with, like, all kinds of crazy weapons and stuff. And I can't even begin to speak to that,
I'm just surprised that game is still going so strongly as it is.
Yeah, it's still really fun as just a straight up, team-on-team kind of first-person shooter game. Just at its core, it's a lot of fun to play. The way you move and shoot and all that stuff feels really snappy. Plus, it's got like that... It's not adorable, obviously, but like the art style is just really compelling. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where everything's just a little bit over the top and kind of wacky.
Yeah.
I like that too.
Cool.
And I imagine that the economic stuff gave that game a little more legs than it otherwise would have had. Like the ability that the things that randomly get dropped, you could actually make real money off of.
Oh, yeah, right.
I'm sure that's given that game a lot more life. So that was kind of cool. And then other than that, I played a little Nom Nom Galaxy, which is the new game from the Pixel Junk guys. And this one I like a lot. It's sort of like you're kind of one of those 2D crafting games, where you got to collect resources and build stuff. This one, you're making a factory that makes soup. And it's almost exactly like all of those, except for what's so awesome about it is that it has objectives. Like, you go to a brand new planet, and then on that planet, your goal is to sell more soup than your AI competitor. So you're doing all the same kind of gathering resources and bringing them back to base and setting up automation and all this stuff. And the automation tools are really fun. Except for, like, it's got a goal. It's got something you're trying to do. You're trying to sell more soup than these other fuckers over here. And it's like a market share thing. So, like, once you push them out of the market, you win that planet, and you go to the next planet. So that turns out that was all I needed from these sorts of crafting games, was just, like, something on top of everything. Like, give me a level to beat or, like, an overall goal, Yeah. And it doesn't hurt that it all controls very well with a controller. Plays really nicely. It's all really smooth. And I think they're ramping up to release, but they're not quite there yet. But that's a pretty good one. It's an easy recommend. And that about wraps up my week.
Cool.
All right, guys. Well, shall we move on, get on to some topics?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So for the first topic, I thought we could delve into the concept of randomness in video games. It's one of the smaller components, but I think it has a lot of potential to really make or break how a game feels and plays. From, damage indicators that can go from like 10 to 20, or just even how a population in a world like a Civilization game can have random outputs. And there's just a lot of like depth that can be gained, but at the same time, if you make a game too random, it can feel like it takes a lot of luck and like it's kind of crappy to play and can be frustrating. So there's a balance to be struck there.
Hearthstone did it the wrong way, I think, with Gnomes versus Goblins, because it was a bit too random.
How's that?
Every other card just has a random effect, like it gives you a random extra card, or it summons a random other minion and stuff like that. And Hearthstone is not a very skillful game to begin with, but what little skill you can apply to the game sort of disappears when you've got a lot of cards in your deck that give you random other cards. So you can't really account for that in a lot of ways, which is sort of annoying, because you could be ahead of your opponent one moment, and then you can get a bad RNG card, and you're fucked, basically.
Yeah.
I don't really like that when I'm playing competitively, but from a casual standpoint, I think that is bloody hilarious, because it leads to very interesting games most of the time that are more fun than very tactical.
Yeah. I wonder if that was maybe their vision for that, just to make it more chaotic and fun and take it away from the very calculated sort of pace.
Oh, definitely. I never got the idea that this wasn't working as it was intended.
You know what's weird when you mention randomness? I was thinking back to an article I read a while ago, which I think it had to do with like the iPod Shuffle, where they basically needed to go back and I guess like redo the algorithm to make it less random, because people were finding that when it's really random, it had a tendency to just randomly pick like the similar set of songs over and over again. So people were complaining that their experience was, I guess, too consistent, or it wasn't shuffling enough. So they had to go back and basically tell the randomizer to not be as random. It's a really weird concept where I don't know. I guess people don't really understand what the randomness really entails.
I had an iPod Classic that had the new random feature, and I felt like what it did was it would prefer to give you songs that you rated 4 or 5 stars over songs that you rated 3 or 2 or 0 stars.
Yeah, I know that's how Spotify does their shuffle.
Yeah, I don't like it in Spotify, because Spotify repeats a lot of songs. Like every other song will be a song that it already picked a couple of minutes ago, which is annoying.
Yeah, their shuffle's terrible, but I think I read something that said like their shuffle is based on what you rate highly.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I guess the reason I thought about that is just relating it back to video games. I found a lot of instances where like these random features, they have so many ways of going wrong that a lot of developers, when they're programming it, it's random, but it's within a certain set of confines. So I guess as a user, you're really only getting the appearance of random. What you're actually getting is a very carefully selected, or at least curated, stream of content that's being presented to you. But I mean, it's weird because even though it's very carefully simulated, it's done so to give the appearance of randomness.
Right. Yeah, so you can't plan for it.
Because ultimately you have to be fun has to be the main consideration. And you sort of make sacrifices to true randomness in order to, ensure that something is fun a higher percentage of the time.
Right. Like I said, it's the concept that, I almost guess we're deceiving ourselves into believing that it's randomness when it's in fact it's actually very carefully selected.
Yeah. And I was thinking about its just overall impact on strategy. Like, people seem to think that introducing random elements to a game can take away from its strategic nature, because you can't plan out the exact, and I guess what you could say is that it would make it more tactical in that situation. But in a way, like as a game, it's more interesting to play if you have to tame the randomness with your sort of mastery of the game's systems.
Right.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter though, your mastery of the system. If stuff is random, you can't really account for anything, so you don't really know what to expect. And I do see what you mean. Like, you have to approach that problem, or you have to tackle that problem as it happens. But does it really add an awful lot in competitive games? Because in single-player games, it's awesome when it's got random stuff. But in competitive stuff?
I mean, it adds a certain amount of unpredictability.
Yeah, but is that what you want, though? Because you want the unpredictability to come from your opponent's actions and not from the actions of stuff on your side.
That's true, but if you're both sort of wrangling with the same random system, sometimes they come out ahead, sometimes you come out ahead. In a way, if it's not done to an extreme, that can be your kind of balancing act where the new players stay around longer because sometimes, they get that hit and they come out ahead versus somebody who's been playing the game. But then it gets frustrating for the old players.
So randomness as a hook could be interesting. Yeah, I think that could be a great purpose for random stuff.
Yeah, sometimes you get lucky. And I mean, it's just part of everything, really. And it stops it from being boring. I don't really... I find the games that are always flat with no sort of variability at all to be kind of boring.
Well, the way I'm kind of thinking about it is I'm comparing it to sports. The most exciting moments in sports are from things that are unpredictable. So
absolutely,
if you have a quarterback who throws 99 out of 100 passes perfectly, but that 100th pass is an interception. That interception's going to...
And it happens at, the right time, in the last 2 minutes.
And you never know when it's going to happen. I think that adds a lot to the game. I don't know necessarily if that has a place in video games, but I think that should be explored.
When it's in sports, it's the people that are unpredictable, not the game itself. When it happens in games, the game is unpredictable as well as your opponent, so you spend half the time fighting yourself as well as your opponent.
I mean, it happens in sports too. I mean... I watch a lot of American football, so that's what I'm going to keep going back to. But a player slipping on the field, that's has nothing to do with the player necessarily. If it's just a slippery spot on the field and he happened to step on it, then he falls. Or if there's a gust of wind during a kick, those are things that are kind of uncontrollable about the game, but they're still there, and they make pretty big impacts.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
You get more excitement, but the more excitement you sort of inject through this method, the less predictability that you get, to the point where it gets bad and it's too random. But just enough of a random sort of element can make something really interesting, because you could come out on top. It's a great way to make underdog stories for sure. And I agree with what you're saying, that the unpredictability could come from the opponent, and maybe that's the ideal source, but then you very quickly run into a situation where, without any sort of randomness at all, it's very strict, it's very straight-laced. The number of plays and the order that the plays happen in become very, they're very predictable. And so then it's just a playbook versus a playbook, and there's not much to that. Hearthstone, maybe they went too far with the RNG and the cards, but you still have RNG that shuffles your deck before the beginning of every round.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's kind of like Magic, where you do have a choice on what you're putting in your deck, so that the RNG is still constrained with a certain amount. But it's confined because you get to pick out of what cards is going to get drawn from your deck.
Right, and I think that goes all the way back around to the iPod thing you were talking about. The best way to implement randomness is not truly 100% chaos. It's a sort of controlled...
Yeah, I feel like that's what critical hits kind of in League of Legends falls under. If you have a 25% crit chance, it's not totally random.
Yeah, and who doesn't love a good critical hit? It's super exciting.
And it's weird for, I guess, video games, because as a system, video games, they can't really be random because, because then you run into all these issues about, bugs and unpredictable content. It's, you need to have a very carefully constructed, experience for the user, because that's how you can predict how you're going to measure your metrics, how you're actually going to let the story proceed. You need to make sure that every little piece fits with each other. But I definitely think you can interject moments of randomness that help, I guess, go along with the player and to kind of supplement gameplay. Things like, in Skyrim, opening a chest and finding randomized loot, that kind of stuff is fun.
Yeah, but that's what I meant. In single-player games, it makes the experience a lot more interesting.
I think it does in multiplayer, too.
It can, as long as the randomness isn't overtaking, I guess, the other player, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, the randomness shouldn't be the focal point, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Certainly not.
Unless you want something that's just absolute frickin' chaos, in which case, maybe go nuts. But there's definitely an acceptable level of it. And it's just, as something to add to your game, it's interesting. You can also use it to simulate very complex systems, things that contain all sorts of factors that maybe we don't entirely understand how to program for, the preferences of an entire population or something, for example, or, you know, the way that weather can and seasons can affect crops and things like that. You can set that to random and almost basically have the same effect without understanding all the minute factors that go into actually creating those systems in the real world.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. Enrique, you might know what I'm talking about here, but the crafting stuff in WildStar was RNG.
Yes, it was, and that actually became very frustrating.
Yes, that's a great example of RNG just destroying more than it helps you make, because that one felt completely RNG, and because crafting was sort of expensive to do and the materials were pretty hard to get, it was very frustrating.
Yeah, that's tricky. Was it just like random output, or whatever stats it had would be random, like a Diablo 3 kind of thing?
What was it? What was it again? You had to sort of aim for stuff?
Yeah, it was weird. Like, you had to kind of like direct your crafting, and it had a chance to... it had a chance to have like randomized stats on it.
Oh yeah, the randomized stats.
And you could come out with a completely crap item. And, you know, when you waste all those resources on it, I mean, that's really freaking frustrating when you have like 7 or 8 things you try crafting and all of them are duds.
Yeah, and they did the same with the raids, didn't they? Like, random, like you'd get gear that you need, but the stats on that gear would be randomized, so somebody else could have the exact same sword or the exact same gun as you have, but their stats would be better, because the raiding was balls to the walls hard. That was just shit.
That sounds like too much, because you're hoping for a random drop and then random stats on top of that random drop.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember that was a huge sore point with Diablo 3 when it first launched, the crafting system, where you craft something and it has a random stats for everybody. And I remember it was frustrating for when you had a class like a barbarian and you roll like a barbarian class weapon, you make it, and suddenly it has intelligence, which doesn't really benefit your class that much.
Yeah, same problem with drops in Diablo 3 too.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting back to, where like, you know, you want to have that randomized system, but a lot of times you only really benefit from them when they occur within a confined space.
Like, nobody has a problem with the crits in Diablo 3, or, you know, the damage that can scale or change, you know, like damage that rolls in levels. Like, but when it comes down to items and stuff, it can get frustrating.
Yeah.
There's the other end of randomness, like past interesting is just frustrating.
Yeah, well, crits benefit you,
right?
And if you get some really shitty stats due to RNG, that's not really fun, is it?
No.
But if RNG gets applied to how much damage you do and it gets you crits, that's absolutely fine. But randomized stats on gear?
Yeah, it's kind of annoying.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like good game design.
Well, I think it also depends on the type of game. You know, like with Diablo, it doesn't work because the whole purpose of Diablo is to get stronger, and every little piece of loot you find and every enemy you kill, it's all towards that end goal of getting stronger. So when you get an item, you know, I guess when that randomization goes against the core element of the gameplay, then yeah, it's completely detrimental and people don't enjoy it. But going back to what Ryan's talking about before, I mean, DayZ is a game that has a lot of randomness built into it, with, you know, the different conditions you can find weapons and gears in, where you may or may not be able to find food or water or drink. And I mean, getting poisoned from just eating, you know, the wrong kind of fruit or something like that. But again, that's a survival game, so the randomness on there plays, I think, a crucial element in the style of the game.
It fits the concept, and it essentially helps you to get more immersed in the game. So yeah, it totally has a place there.
Yeah, like I mean, a little detail that I like, for example, is they implemented a system where when you have canned food, normally you need a can opener to open it, but you can actually use now any kind of bladed weapon. So if you have, I don't know, it's like a wrench, a hatchet, anything that has a blade on it, you can open it. But there's a percentage that it may or may not lose some of that, like the contents of it. So I mean, you know, that kind of makes sense, because at that point it becomes kind of a calculated risk, and it adds a little bit more to the immersion on it. But again, you know, you're not in a scenario where,
and it's cool too, because how else do you simulate all the factors that come down to opening a can with a knife?
Right.
You know, like there's a whole lot of physics stuff going on there. There's like all kinds of things that you can't possibly calculate or program all of them for. Mm-hmm. But you just put a little random thing on there, and all of a sudden it's like a decent approximation of what you would expect in the real world.
And it works. I mean, it's also like programmed in a way where if you use an axe, you have a higher chance of spilling more than if you use like a screwdriver. So a screwdriver, you're probably going to end up with a decent amount, you know, 80 to 100% left. And if you use an axe to bash a can open, you're going to have like 30%, you know? So I think that there's almost a predictability to the unpredictability.
Yeah, and it's weird because I guess like that's the whole argument. I keep going back to that. We don't actually really want randomness. We just want the appearance of it.
Yeah, risk reward. Yeah,
I don't know, because it's been my experience that more often than not, when we're actually faced with a game that has real randomness, we get really pissed because we don't feel like we're in control of the hand that we're dealt when we're playing a game. And I think because it's the way we consume games in the media in general, that it's done something for our enjoyment. Anything that's not conducive to the enjoyment isn't seen as good. So randomness, it goes that very thin line of how it can increase your experience, but at the same time it can detract from it.
Because you want to maintain control,
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to think of games where like there's a real a random element. I'm actually kind of hard pressed to find one.
Like fully random?
Yeah. Like I guess like something like Dwarf Fortress has like randomized elements, I guess.
Yeah, in world creation and generation, but not so much as like on your actual play, as like it's not completely random.
Yeah,
I mean something like that. I don't think anybody's ever made a roll to move game for the computer, but I mean something like that would almost certainly be. I mean nobody likes those because they're too random. Like roll the dice, move this number of spaces, sigh, okay.
In like Mario Party's the only one where you would literally roll a die.
Mario Party is pretty gosh dang random.
I guess Heroes of the Storm has it as well, because some of the objectives will be randomized. Not the objectives themselves, but where they spawn will be randomized. So it's sort of random where the team fights will happen.
But again,
I mean,
it's that randomness contained within.
Yeah.
It's still the same objectives. They're only randomizing a small portion of it.
Yeah, but that makes a very big impact, though. Where the objective spawns, that makes a pretty big impact on the gameplay as a whole. But yeah, you're right. You're right.
It does, but like I said, like we're going back to that, like it's the image of unpredictability.
Yeah, it's definitely true.
I mean, what would that game even look like? Like you'd press right, and then what? It would do a random thing to see which way you moved, and then you'd press attack, and it would randomly coin flip to decide whether you not attacked or not, and then if you did, randomly flip for damage, and then you do that amount of damage. Yeah. That'd be completely fucking bananas.
It's gonna be that'll take me all of 2.5 minutes to play the game and give up on it.
Yeah, that's way too much.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, randomness it's all right, but you should not use it too much, especially in a competitive, context, because you don't really want to fight yourself. You want to fight the opponent, I guess.
But you want it to stay interesting, so put just enough. But it's easy to go wrong and have too much of a good thing.
True fucking story.
All right, so I want to talk to you guys a little bit about AI in different games and kind of what makes AI good, what makes AI bad, and what your guys' thoughts are about that, because I kind of feel like AI is one of those things. It's like audio in movies or TV or video. It's when it's done right, it's good. Like no one really notices. I don't know if that's the right word, but when it's done bad, somebody definitely notices because something's off. So I just want to maybe what are some examples of good and bad AI in different games?
Good AI can definitely make like a single player experience that much more enjoyable. I don't know if you've ever played Fear.
Yeah.
Like the first one.
It's been a long time.
The AI in that game was really good.
Dude, it was downright terrifying. They like the way they would adapt and they try to flank you man, dude, it was great.
Yeah, it was really lifelike. They would flank you if they couldn't shoot you at your current position. They would, dole out orders to all the other people in their group. It really felt like you were playing against real people, which was pretty great, especially for the time. I know the game's not really all that old, but in game years, it is pretty old.
One of my favorite AI stories, it was on an old Game Informer where they were talking about Oblivion, and Bethesda was talking about like, what are some like weird bugs that you found during like the, your gameplay sessions and stuff. And they kept mentioning that there was one part in the game where you were in a prison and you were supposed to go find a prisoner and get a key from them. But the testers kept finding a bug where like whenever they would go to, to a certain prisoner, he'd be dead. So you can activate the quest dialogue and you can start it. So like, what the hell's going on? Why does this NPC keep dying? And I guess like they went back through the code and they found out that I guess the guards in the prison, like their AI, they would sit up like upstairs and eat the food. And then I guess like that's what they were programmed to do. But once they finished their food, they didn't have any. So they would get up and walk around the rest of the dungeon trying to find food. And the only other instance of food was inside this NPC's like room. So they would go in there, steal his food. And because NPCs are triggered to attack whenever you steal from them, he would attack the guards. The guards would kill them. And then they would just take his food and go back upstairs.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and it was a really weird system where the AI kind of like introduced this almost like weird like chain of events. So whenever the player would reach that part, the NPC would be dead. And there was no way they could really fix it. So they just ended up putting an unlimited supply of food in the guards' tower so they wouldn't leave the tower.
Wow, that's actually pretty cool. It's like a very, very unforeseen chain of events.
I mean, it's just really cool, kind of like, when you're designing AI, I guess, it's obviously it's a very complicated process, but what a lot of game studios do, it looks like, is that they just kind of give these NPCs like a certain set of orders or like a chain of command to follow to simulate kind of the AI process. And it's just like one of those instances where like that, I guess it worked a little bit too well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to do it. That's for sure. It definitely makes for some good stories. I like all the development stories about like AI and stuff like that.
But that thing about Oblivion, that just goes to show like how logical the AI is, that it will follow a certain like specific amount of steps, like if this happens then I do that, and that could turn into some very unforeseen consequences and situations that you couldn't really have anticipated for, even though the AI is doing exactly what it was programmed to do.
That's why I worry about a robot uprising, because like that jump in logic is very, very short.
Well, robots are pretty easy to deal with. Tell them a tautology and they'll explode. I mean, that is what movies tell me.
I believe you. But programming AI it's like Ryan said. I mean, you don't notice if it's good. Like if somebody's game has good AI, nobody talks about it. And what's interesting about making it is that they actually can't make it perfect. They can't make an AI that plays perfectly, because then they're better than the player.
Right.
So, like, I think one of the hardest parts is probably just making it bad in a way that is fun for the player to play against.
Yeah, I think when you say that, the example that comes to my head is Mario Kart.
I was just thinking about that.
There's nothing about the Mario Kart AI that takes me out of the experience of playing Mario Kart. I'm thinking of like, because I'm currently playing Spec Ops: The Line, there's certain times where the AI are doing what they're supposed to be doing, but it leaves them in a totally vulnerable position that a real player would never do that. So it just kind of it pulls you out of it. Either they've left one side of them totally open, or they're oblivious to you standing in the open, that kind of thing. But in Mario Kart, I feel like even if I'm playing against all bots, I never have that moment where a computer, just stops on the track or freaking veers off a cliff or something for no reason. And I just think that's an example of a game that does AI really, really well.
It's really funny that you mentioned that, because I think it was Splinter Cell Blacklist, I want to say, was the most recent one that came out.
Yeah, I think so.
The AI was actually laughable almost in a way, because, like with the game, obviously, it's, a lot of it's stealth mechanic and kind of learning the patterns of, how the AI is patrolling. But you would have the AI and they'd have this chatter, so so it kind of feels like it's more alive. But it would almost telegraph where they were going to be. Like the AI would say, like, hey, I'm going to go walk down this hallway, or hey, I'm going to stand here for a little bit. So it was really laughable, because as you're playing the game, it kind of broke your immersion immediately, because, you were almost getting, spoilers for how to beat the game when the AI is telling you what it's going to be doing.
It's not just that in Splinter Cell, and a lot of stealth games have got a problem with this one, is that if you just say that you're crouching along this long corridor, right, and there's a guard patrolling that, and there's lights hanging everywhere, right? So you shoot out a couple of the lights, and there's no real reason for that to happen. So the guard obviously is alarmed, and he's going to go look for the source of the lamps breaking, right? Mm-hmm. But he does that for a couple of minutes, and then he says something like, they always say something like, it's probably just the wind. Then he goes back doing his normal thing. I mean, you sort of have to do that in stealth games, I guess.
I mean, it's just like Skyrim. When you get your stealth high enough, you can shoot somebody in the head, point blank range, and then go back into stealth, and they're standing there with an arrow sticking out of their head. They're like, must have been the wind.
Yeah, well, that is an example of bad AI.
Well, I mean, it kind of ties back to what, like, Sam was saying, like, you almost have to find this weird medium between making the AI believable, but you also don't want to make it too good, because you need to dumb it down to give the players a chance.
Well, you need to make the AI as smart as a regular Joe would be. You sort of have to simulate what a real person would do if that person was a guard.
And I think that's even harder than just making a perfect guard, because you have to put a certain amount of like badness in it, and like how much is the question, and it's easy to go too far. But because playing against a guy who was perfect, who knew exactly where you were and exactly how to trace you, when you messed up, I guess that could make a fun video game too, but it would be somewhat more frustrating. And also, they'd have to chase you in ways that it would be really hard to program for.
It would be unbeatable if the AI was absolutely perfect.
I think the example Ryan gave is perfect, though. Like with a game like Mario Kart, where the AI's role, it's actually pretty major, because they provide like the biggest competition for your game, for the actual gameplay experience. But their influence feels so minimal that when you're playing the game, it literally just feels like part of it. It doesn't stand out whatsoever.
Yeah, it's there, but it's not intrusive.
But they have a weird kind of rubber banding thing too, though. For some reason, yeah, like in Mario Kart, if you get too far ahead, they like rubber band in a weird way that I don't know if you could entirely attribute to AI. But as far as them actually driving when they're near you outside of that, I absolutely agree. They do play with really good like smart plays and AI and stuff like that. But they get a little bit of a boost, you know what I mean? When you do come out on top, they get some stuff that's like outside of the realm of what a human would be able to do to be able to come back.
Yeah, like the what is it? Is 150cc the hardest spots on Mario Kart?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, 200 now because they put out that expansion.
Those things are insane. I just feel like I need to say that.
Why? Because I'm not a Mario Kart player.
Well, there's shots that take skill to line up and other things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a case of them being too good. I mean, you're subjecting yourself to it, but that's a case of maybe the AI being too good it is inhuman, you know?
If you can imagine in a kart racer, you know how kart racers play, you can fire the green shell and it goes out from the front of your kart in a straight line.
Right.
And so it's sort of like a skill shot. You know, you can hit somebody far away if you kind of think about where they're going to go and anticipate their movements, but they are like nasty accurate with stuff like that.
Okay. They're downright surgical. Yeah, and then you also have it's almost like you said, that weird rubber banding effect where you can pass an AI, and most of the time, you'll usually keep the lead, but when you get to the higher difficulties like the 150 and the 200cc cups, it's like passing the AI, they will have, you could knock them out, have them hit by 4 or 5 different players, be in 5th place, and the AI will somehow miraculously be able to take every corner, every drift, every shortcut, and end up first place again shortly after.
Yeah.
I've got an example of a game that had very bad AI, but it wasn't detrimental to the experience, and that is Doom 3. I think I read an interview with the guy who made it, like the lead designer. I forget his name, but he said something along the lines like, I don't believe I need to use AI, I just need to place all the enemies in the exact right spots. So that might be a good example of bad AI, but really great implementation, so it doesn't even matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially in Doom, that's a lot of I want to pick up this armor pack. Oh shit, the wall fell down. Oh shit, there's a Kako demon behind it. Just really well implemented stuff. It doesn't have to be that smart if it's in the right position.
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely a good example. But as far as FPS stuff goes, the AI in that is becoming almost unnoticeable. All you need is a few good flanks and maybe they take cover and then, you're good enough. As long as they're not running into a wall and just standing there, then that's pretty decent. But I mean, as far as something like, what about a strategy game, like playing StarCraft or Civilization against the CPU? That's somewhere where AI comes into play in a major way.
I think that Civilization is very base in terms of AI.
I guess that's kind of true.
Because it doesn't really concern itself with tactics. It just makes a shitload of units and tries to build wide. And that's basically it.
RTS games I've found have been kind of hit or miss with AI. Because, I mean, there's some where you feel like you're playing against the best player in the world. And then other games, it's like every unit they make, they send at you immediately. So you just get a wave of one unit group at a time.
I mean, or the worst case is especially with StarCraft, you get the AI that's just insanely optimized. So by the time you have your first base and you send a little unit to scout, they have 2 outposts with, full-on upgrades. And you're like, well, fuck this game.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's no instance where you can give an AI the same tools as a player and have it be an interesting contest. Normally the human always has enough of an edge in that situation to come out ahead.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, there's also that something to say with, having an AI that it clearly has, I guess, an illogical advantage. A perfect example is the Sid Meier's games. I mean, when you crank the AI up to the Prince or the God difficulties, I think it's King and then God. I mean, they're insane. Their development time is shortened. Their technology research is a lot quicker than yours. So you'll get into instances where you'll just be starting your second settlement, and before you know it, they already have a whole continent taken over.
Do you think that stuff like that is a fair way to sort of handicap for the outside of the software advantage that the human brain has?
Can you do it any other way though?
Well, you could make them play smarter, maybe. It seems like it might be possible to, within that game space, make the computer really good at it. Isn't there an AI for StarCraft 2 that's absolutely incredible, but plays within the same confines as a human player? I think there is.
I don't know if you can apply that to Civilization. In Civilization, you have to think ahead, you have to think very, very far ahead. And I'm not entirely sure if a computer can do that. It certainly can't adapt to a changing situation as quickly as a human can in the context of Civilization. Mm-hmm. So, and I think what the AI does in StarCraft is it thinks strength in numbers, which is pretty much true, especially in the early game. And it just goes for that.
Well, it's kind of weird because, like with Sid Meier's, I always pictured it in scope of for somebody that's playing in that difficulty and they're subjecting themselves to that difficulty. There comes the expectation that they're already a skilled player and they know how to min-max their approach. So they're given that AI, companion is almost like a handicap where, hey, this person is going to be, I guess, a lot quicker than you are just to kind of make up for the fact that you're supposedly know what you're doing already.
I would like to know if anybody listening has ever beat a game of Civ 4 or 5 on God difficulty. If you have, please send us an email to selectcharacters@gmail.com because I would really like to hear how you did it. Because I tried it and it was fucking impossible.
It seems like sometimes that stuff comes down to not even playing the actual game. It's just finding an exploit in the AI or finding like a way to come at it sideways. Or, if you get an AI that you turned up too hard, you find a way to like catch them on the geometry or something.
Right. I like Left 4 Dead 2, like their AI director system was actually pretty fun where it had kind of had that game that subtly adjusted the players, like I guess the way they were proceeding through the game. It would launch random hordes of enemies, it would place items throughout, it would actually place special effect at a specific point, so it kind of kept the game pretty dynamic to a degree.
That was really sophisticated, wasn't it?
I mean, at the time, yeah. I mean, like I said, it's just the idea, especially the idea of having, certain environmental hazards at specific areas and having just like hordes unexpectedly come when you're progressing a little quicker than, I guess you should, quote unquote.
Yeah, I think that was a good AI, and it knew to give you like moments of breathers in between, like it knew how to pace it so that it made a good experience.
Yeah, and like even that would like actually kind of help build with the tension where like even then, you'd have those moments where you'd run to supply cache and it was enough for you to regroup, but it would always, sometimes it would throw in just a little bit hint of unexpectedness. You'd have like a smoker pull one of your guys out while you're waiting or...
Yeah.
It's just a really interesting concept.
And they have something similar to that in that, oh boy, what's the name of the game? It's like the Prison Architect game, but it's like a planetary sort of exploration. It's like matches the Prison Architect style. RimWorld works like that. RimWorld is sort of based on, it has an AI director that sends enemies at you like when it thinks you're ready for them, and you can actually choose different personalities as for like which AI person you want to be in charge of how your story's going to play out and how difficult it is, which I think is an interesting way to use AI. And like instead of almost like an opponent, like a experienced navigator who kind of doles out things at the proper times. I think that's a really interesting thing.
So to sum it up, AI is like music. Music in films. If you don't notice it, it's done very well.
I agree.
Yes.
So I want to talk about games that have no ending, or at least have a way of endlessly giving you new content either through DLC or by design, like for instance Skyrim, that has the randomized quests, for instance.
And a nice mod scene too.
Sorry?
And a nice mod scene. You can get the endless gaming thing with a good mod scene as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think we can just pull the mod scene into this as well because they essentially supply games with endless amounts of content.
The randomized questing though was kind of lackluster because after a while you start realizing that it was basically the same quest with just a different NPC.
Yeah, it will just change a couple of variables at the most. But, in essence, it is still a way to generate endless content. And, expansion packs do that as well, especially in MMOs. Like, you can never really beat an MMO. There's always a bit of content that you haven't done, and by the time that you will have done everything, something new comes out. So, the whole cycle starts again. And I think that is quite kind of interesting, that the end credits don't necessarily have to be the end of the experience.
Sure, definitely not. But the problem is like when you keep bolting all this additional content onto a game that you've already played, so that you're just doing the same things but just again, like as far as actual actions that the player can complete and like mechanics that they can tinker with, just because you give more world with more textures and quests and stuff, it doesn't change the basic gameplay loop. You're just adding content to that over and over again, and that's a bummer.
I guess the question is, what kind of endless content do you guys prefer? Do you prefer the more linear path where they just keep adding like expansion or content at the end of it, or do you prefer, I guess, the type of game that offers you a lot of replayability, whether it be because like just some kind of random system or just something else inherent to the game?
Or a third one, games that have no real like end game. Even though you've unlocked all the stuff, there is no way for you to actually beat the game. Think about City Skylines, for instance.
I would put a game like City Skyline or like that replayability game, where for whatever reason it's just a game that keeps you coming back, where you'll actively want to start from scratch, like over and over again.
So would competitive games fall in that too? Because Counter-Strike, you're just replaying the same.
Yeah, I mean,
I would
defuse
say
the
so,
bomb.
yeah.
or save the hostage thing over and over and over.
Yeah, I mean, because it's still like an endless kind of game where, you don't have like a set finish line. It's just, you keep replaying the same scenario over and over again.
Yeah, plus you play it for the human element. The human element keeps it interesting.
And the human element is what the end of the game is, because the game ends whenever you decide to stop playing it.
Yeah, that is true for all games, I guess. But when it comes to competitive multiplayer stuff, you play it because of the other people playing it.
Yeah, but I mean, to go back a bit, I kind of agree with Sam's view where, when you just keep adding content like after the fact, it doesn't really change what the core gameplay is, and that in itself can kind of be dampening to the overall experience. Like Skyrim, as fun as Skyrim is, if it wasn't for the mod community actually adding a big diversity into the gameplay itself, if we were just going off what Bethesda released in terms of DLC, I mean, it'd get pretty old really quickly. Like I wouldn't still be picking up Skyrim now, years after the fact.
Yeah, I think a lot of those games go on too long. I mean, I know we're talking about endless games, but I think a lot of those games, even that aren't endless, go on way longer than they have any right to.
Do you think that as time goes on, developers start to design games that have endless content in them? Like, do you see that happening more and more? Like, for instance, what Fallout 4 is going to do with you building towns and stuff like that? Like, the way that is going to supply you with endless content is apparently raiders attacking your villages, and that will happen indefinitely?
I don't see that as endless content, though. It's just a repetition of a small mechanic.
That goes on forever. I mean, it's endless repetition. I don't know. It's like endless new content or endless, repetition of content, like you were saying.
What would be a game, like, what would be an example of a game that's truly endless right now?
Something procedurally generated, it would have to be.
Like Minecraft or something?
Well, I mean, like Chris mentioned City Skylines. I think that's a perfect example.
I think Eve is also in that ballpark.
Yeah, Eve as well. Well, Eve is weird because, like, it's endless in the sense that it's all player-run, economy and corporation-wise. So, again, it has, like, that really big human element.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like MOBAs are endless as well because you can just keep on playing that. But yeah, Eve specifically, it seems like that game is constantly getting new content, and not because the developer is implementing that, but because the players are actively doing that, keeping the game fresh.
Yeah, but I think when we talk about MMOs and the endless content, that's a completely different argument to have because, I mean, by their very nature, they have to be endless in a way to stop player attrition.
They're endless, but they're not,
Right.
Yeah, like Sam said, there's a lot of repetition going on. It's a new box around an old concept.
I think it's a game that has an end. You just enjoy replaying it.
In theory, yeah, you could get, if there were never another expansion released, you could get the best gear in the game and then you'd be done, right?
Right, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's why, like, going back, like, City Skylines is, I think, a perfect example because there's no real end game. It's just build a city, maintain it, and then expand it.
And then do it again. And that game is endless by nature of its replayability.
The only way that game is going to end is if your computer crashes, because after a while the simulation gets so heavy on your CPU that it just crashes.
Yeah, but still, it goes back to the idea, like, there's no real end goal. There's nothing in the game that says, hey, you need to get to this point and then you win the game.
That's definitely true, yes.
So, I mean, sandbox games would fall in that category then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, stuff like DayZ is pretty much endless.
Almost definitely.
I like that kind of content, but at the same time, I really like games where everything's familiar,
How do you mean exactly?
Well, like if I'm playing DayZ or Minecraft or something where everything that happens in the game is based on what we feel like doing, it's nice to go to Counter-Strike where I know what's going to happen, I know what the calls are, I know what the score has to be, all of that stuff. Sometimes it's refreshing to get back to the structure of a replayable game.
I agree. I like games that you can beat, generally speaking. They feel more entertaining to me. It's got to stop at some point.
It's more like a tightly tailored, I guess, experience.
Yeah. I guess it's possible. I mean, theoretically, if procedural generation keeps developing and becomes more advanced, there could be a game that just procedurally generates itself off into infinity and you can just keep playing it until you're done.
No Man's Sky.
Yeah, No Man's Sky.
Well, no, because No Man's Sky, you do have a goal, and that's to reach the center of the universe. And I think the developers have actually recently got on record saying that once a player reaches the end of the universe, they fully expect them to put the controller down, not pick up the game again.
Yeah, but it doesn't really have to be the end, though, because even though the universe itself is sort of finite, because there has to be an end to the universe, it's so ridiculously large that you can just basically see it as an infinite amount of content. Like, how repetitious the content is going to be is anyone's guess at this point. But still, you could probably not see everything the game has to offer in your lifetime, which I think is pretty interesting.
And if you take those tools and then extrapolate it out into the kind of game they could make with that 5 years from now, and you've got like a completionist's worst nightmare.
Oh, yes. Oh man,
It's weird. I mean, there's a time and a place because there are certain games that I play just because you get the satisfaction of beating it, and once you're done, that's all you want. You just want a very self-contained experience. But I don't know. There's also those titles where like City Skyline, Sid Meier's Civilization series. It's just, I mean, and even XCOM to a degree, even though that has a set ending, they're just games that they're core gameplay elements are so fun that you don't mind repeating the gameplay over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, what would it mean for a game to be truly endless and also be fun the entire time?
That's true, because I mean, it brings up the question, like, can you really have fun when a game doesn't give you a win scenario?
it depends on you. Actually, do you enjoy the mechanics of the game? Are they so enjoyable that you can play them indefinitely?
It would certainly come down to a personal preference thing, but some amount of that has to be the concrete bedrock, that everything else is based off of, and you can work your way through that, and then, once you have a grip of the interactions, I mean, I don't know if you can enjoy the basic movement controls and stuff so much to the point that you would play the same game on and on and on and on forever, because it would have to have some sort of innovation programmed into it, right? Because, at least for me, I'm looking for new experiences in video games. I want to play something fresh, and one game that lasts forever, I don't know how they would make it sort of have that.
Well, Minecraft is a thing, and people enjoy playing that because they can make their own content, basically. I mean, the amount of stuff that you can do in that game is pretty much ridiculous. I mean, there was this one guy who built a working computer inside of Minecraft, so you could play that indefinitely, and you could do whatever you like, I guess.
But it still just is what it is. I mean, that's...
Is it, though? If you're continuously making new stuff that nobody has ever made before, that's not the same thing over and over. You might be using the same tools, but the end result is wildly different.
Like within... You're talking about the way that they build within the game world? I mean, isn't a sword always going to do basically the same thing, no matter what kind of crazy machine you build?
Yeah, but is that really the focus of the game, though? No. The focus of the game is building stuff. It's Lego for adults.
That makes sense. It could be that the focus is out of line with sort of what I'm trying to jam on, but that's a good point. And those mechanics, I guess those building mechanics themselves are inexhaustible then in that scenario.
Yeah, well, it has to be. I mean, look at how popular the game is. It's one of the most downloaded or bought games ever. And every time that you go search for news or go look at YouTube for stuff that people have built, they're always coming out with more stuff, with newer stuff, bigger stuff, more unique stuff. And that is basically them generating new content for a game they enjoy playing.
It kind of seems that Minecraft is kind of the perfect combination of that, I guess, because you do have the sandbox element where there's no one telling you what to do and you build whatever you want, anything you can think of, but there's also mods you can download that, if you want a narrative experience that's very contained, you can do that through a mod, and then they're also adding more content. So it's kind of got all those things we've been talking about all in one game, and it's been successful,
Yeah.
Actually, I guess, I know we're talking about endless content, but what about the complete opposite? What about very strictly finite content? Have you guys heard of Upsilon Circuit?
Nope.
Tell me more.
It is a game. They announced it, I think, at PAX earlier last year, and the concept is actually really interesting. It's a game that you can only play once, and when you die, you're completely locked out of the game for the rest of the gameplay.
What?
Yeah, and I guess it's supposed to be kind of like a dungeon crawler / puzzle game. And what you do is when you go to play the game, I guess everyone kind of connects to it, and you can watch the person playing it, but it only allows 8 people at a time to log into the server, and of those 8, only one person can play at a time.
What?
And they go through the dungeon and progress as far as they can, solving puzzles or whatever. Meanwhile, the entire audience is watching, and as soon as that player dies, it kicks them out, makes them part of the audience, and it'll randomly select another person to come in and take the place.
Wow, so it becomes more of a spectator sport than anything else.
It's interesting. Like, how do you guys feel about that concept for a game?
That sounds phenomenal.
Yeah, it sounds unique.
Yeah.
Sounds more like a social experiment than a game.
Well, it's interesting because the studio was I guess they got a lot of really interesting feedback from it, and they were saying that they want to almost turn it to a game show style type because you're going to have such an interactive audience with it. They're implementing things like voice chat, so the audience can actually interact with the person playing the game. They're going to have a style of an in-game announcer, which is a mix of like Max Headroom and like Ronald Reagan. Dude, it's a really interesting concept, but it looks awesome. And like I said, like the idea that you can only play this game once, and after that you die.
So you never get to play it again?
Nope.
That's interesting.
How is that? I don't know how that's enforceable, but like in the hypothetical universe where it was, that's bananas and really cool.
It's pretty easy to enforce, right? If the server can only serve 8 people at any one time, then it's pretty easy to enforce because it won't let other people log in outside of those 8 people.
I mean, I don't know if I'm okay with never being able to play again.
Yeah, that sounds sort of weird.
Because if you're going to pay money for
I mean, it's weird because it's the complete antithesis of what video games are. Like that rapid repetition, you know, like gradually getting better at something.
I guess, and to go along, part of it that they were talking about, I guess, they're going to make it so you have no say. When you're actually playing the game, you have no say over the character, but the audience can actually vote on how to spend your skill points and customize your character.
Oh god, it's Twitch plays Pokemon all over again.
Yeah.
Wow. But what stops you from, I mean, obviously it's still in beta and all that, but like, what if you just got on a different computer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there'll be like some kind of like network trickery, you know, on how to fake it. But I mean, the general idea is that I guess when you log into the game, once you die, that's it. You become like just a participant of the audience, and that's all.
I mean, I guess that you could play it again if you would just use one of your friends' PCs, but in the end, you'll just be known as that guy that just hangs out with you to play that one game on your PC because he can't play it on his own.
Can we stop acting like gamers and stop trying to beat the system?
No, I can't. If there's every time there's a system, that's like my knee-jerk reaction is how do I exploit?
Like, how do you beat this?
Well, that is games, isn't it? I mean, you have to fight against the systems that the game lays out for you. You have to fight against them to beat it. I mean, that is video games at its core.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess going back to the topic, the reason I brought this up is because I guess in a way it's almost the exact opposite of an endless game, where at the same time it does become endless by the very feature that you kind of become an endless participant in one way or another.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, but why would you keep participating after you die?
Also a good question.
Well, because I mean, you still have control over, like, you know, how to upgrade the character and level it up, plus watching the actual people play the game.
But once I got my shot, and I knew I was never going to get another shot, I don't know why I would watch it.
Yeah, I'd quit.
I would totally watch this.
Like, you remember 1 versus 100?
Yeah,
that was
cool. Fun.
But, you know, you could be the one again, you know, so, like, if you ever got to be the one, then, you know, you'd still keep coming back because there was a chance that you might be able to go again. But this small server thing is cool with the observer stuff. It's kind of like, in a little bit of a way, like the Jedi Knight games.
Oh, and okay, I'm actually reading more about the game. Apparently, viewers can not only, you know, like help fill in skill trees and stuff, I guess less kindly watchers will be able to spawn monsters and traps.
So every watcher then, basically.
Oh, God.
As a game show, though, that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, that game will never be beat, ever.
I don't know, it's interesting, and like it seems like they're adding a lot of really interesting mechanics to kind of engage the audience one way or another, so it does bring up that, I guess, tying back to the whole endless gameplay. I mean, there's different ways to go around it.
Yeah, I'll watch it.
Yeah, I don't know.
It sort of sounds like the developer's really starry-eyed about the internet, conveniently forgetting that the internet does not give a fuck about you and your fucking game. If they have the opportunity to screw with somebody else, they will, en masse. So they have to sort of account for that. But that has to... That sounds to me like it's going to be a very interesting experiment. I would love to play it. I would love to watch it.
It does make sense when you compare it to a game show, because people on game shows only get one chance.
Yeah.
And the audience still finds it interesting.
True.
And that game is even interesting in the concept of endless games because it's going to go on. That game is endless, but without you.
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know.
But what happens if nobody ends up beating it?
Will it really matter?
Well, well, say that you are an observer and you've been there from day one and you're really into it and you'll never know how it ends.
Yeah.
That would... Look at what happened when Firefly got cancelled. People are still talking about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, that's a little different, though, because, I mean, Firefly is a show that didn't really gain popularity until years after the fact, and even then it was mainly because cult following and everything.
Well, this sounds like it could be a cult thing.
But wouldn't you experience that same sort of dissatisfaction with any kind of endless game? You've never seen the end of Minecraft, you know, you've never seen everything and anything that can be done. So if there is no ending...
Oh, but there is an end to Minecraft. There is a final boss.
2, technically.
2. Where you've got the Ender Dragon and what?
The Wither.
Yeah, that one. So there is technically an end boss, but it's not really the focus of the game as such, but it does have a win state.
Well, okay. Have you guys actually... You guys have played Minecraft, right?
No.
Yes,
No, not
extensively.
in years.
Do you still play it?
Sometimes, yeah.
What? Well, how come?
Just didn't keep my interest.
Do you think that has to do with just the nature of it? Just because it's an endless game, it doesn't tickle that reward little part in our brain that tells us, hey, you beat the game, good job?
No, I think it's because there's no PvP to it.
You can play Spleef.
I mean, there is, but it's not PvP. You know what I mean? Like,
True.
Right.
True.
there are PvP mods and you can hit people and stuff, but it's not a PvP game. PvP games usually keep me interested.
But yeah, before we veer too much to the realm of off-topic, finite games, like extremely finite games, like the one that you just said, what was the name again?
Upsilon Circuit?
Yeah. That sounds really interesting, but I would rather be able to play a game that I love for as long as I like and just put the controller down when I'm fed up with it. And I would be totally okay with randomly generated content. I will just stop playing once I've had enough.
And then it would not be endless.
Well, not for me, but the game would be endless, but you would stop playing after a while, which doesn't make the game finite. If the game is persistent across all systems because it's in the cloud somewhere or something, it is, for all intents and purposes, endless, but it's just not endless for you.
Do you think that it is to the detriment of the game to be endless, considering that we as people have like this interest and repetition loop where something is very interesting at first, but then the more you're exposed to it, it sort of becomes less and less interesting?
I never really...
Is it to the detriment of a game to be endless because the time people stop playing your game is when they've ridden that interest wave all the way to the bottom and then they let go of the game?
See, I've never really had to think about this, so I'm going to put a pin in that one, and I'm going to get back. I'm going to get back at you when No Man's Sky is released, and I've played a decent amount of it.
Okay, I feel that happen very acutely and very rapidly with video game, and maybe it's got something to do with like the speediness of the repetition, but I just think as people, the more we're exposed to something, naturally the less interesting it is, and naturally also the less fun it is over a long enough period of time. And I wonder if that's a potential pitfall for endless games.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because it just seems when you don't have a clear goal and like there's nothing you're really working towards, the rate of attrition for the game will be a lot higher.
But, like I said, who knows? Extrapolate that technology out 5 years. Maybe there's such a thing as an endless game that remains interesting forever, but I don't think it's out there yet. All right, so that about wraps up this episode, but I wanted to talk to you guys about a new segment that I want to bring online. I want to try and start doing. I consider it maybe sort of like a play-along, and what I want to do is have just randomly pick one of us, have that person recommend a game, and we're going to break that game into manageable chunks, and we're going to play it week by week, sort of like a book club. Also, just in a way that makes sense for that game, so maybe just a certain number of hours or certain maps, rounds, whatever. And we encourage audience participation on this, so once we pick the game, we're all going to play it that week, come back the next week and talk about it. And if you have anything you want to add, thoughts, feelings, send us an email, get involved. We want to make this sort of like a group play together, but at different times kind of concept. So to kick it off, I'm going to go ahead and pull a random number between 1 and 4. Give me just a second here. Dramatic drum roll. All right, Chris.
Woo!
So we're going to start with you and just pick a game.
Well, this is a game that I've been playing quite a lot since the end of the technical alpha, and I know for a fact that all of us have been playing it now, but it might be a good idea to play it a bit more intensely and then, give that game sort of its moment in the limelight. And that game is Heroes of the Storm, Blizzard's new MOBA.
All right.
Good choice.
All right, that's good.
Good choice. So, what I think is call it maybe 5 or 6 hours this week.
Yeah, I could probably schedule that in. Yeah, definitely.
Something like that, and then we'll meet back next week and we'll talk about it. We'll see what we do, how we feel, just general thoughts and insights like we do with all the other stuff we play, and then next week we'll pick something else.
Yeah, sounds cool to me.
So, like I said, you and the audience out there, if you want to play some Heroes of the Storm, if you want to play it with us, whatever, reach out. We'll make it happen, and we'll see where we go from there. So that concludes episode 11. Thank you once again for listening, and, stay in contact. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can send us an email at selectcharacters@gmail.com or at rs.fm/selectcharacters. Really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for listening, and have a great week.
Bye.
See ya.
Later.